Have you ever wondered when humans first drank alcohol? Not beer, not wine, not whiskey. The very first alcoholic drink ever. Who was brave enough to taste it first? Or was it never really a choice at all? Today, alcohol is everywhere. Weddings, birthdays, festivals, even quiet dinners. But thousands of years ago, none of this existed. No bars, no breweries, no bottles. So where did alcohol actually come from? Most people imagine someone accidentally inventing it. A forgotten bowl of fruit, a lucky mistake. But the real story is far older and much stranger. Because humans didn't invent alcohol. Nature did. Long before the first village, long before farming, long before humans even looked human. Alcohol already existed, hidden inside the forest, waiting. Imagine walking through an ancient jungle millions of years ago. Fruit falls to the ground. Days pass. The sun heats it, and tiny wild yeast floating through the air lands on it. The natural sugars inside begin to change. Without fire, without tools, without anyone touching it, the fruit begins to ferment. And fermentation creates something remarkable. Alcohol. The first alcoholic drink on Earth wasn't made by humans. It was made by microbes, tiny organisms too small to see, yet powerful enough to change history. Now imagine an ancient ape wandering through that same forest. It smells the sweet fruit. It looks perfectly normal. But inside, something has changed. One bite. Then another. Minutes later, something feels different. Not enough to collapse, just enough to shift behavior. Scientists believe this happened millions of years before modern humans even existed, and many animals still experience it today. Chimpanzees eat naturally fermented fruit. Elephants sometimes get intoxicated after feasting on overripe fruit. Even birds occasionally lose their coordination after eating fermented berries. Nature has been serving alcohol long before humans ever learned to brew it. But here's something even more surprising. Our bodies seem unusually good at processing alcohol. And that isn't an accident. Inside your liver is an enzyme called alcohol dehydrogenase. Its job is simple. Break down alcohol before it becomes dangerous. Around 10 million years ago, one of our ancient ape ancestors developed a genetic mutation. That mutation made this enzyme far more efficient at breaking down alcohol. Why would evolution reward that? Because fermented fruit falls to the ground, and fruit on the ground is often the ripest and sweetest. It's also the richest in calories. During food shortages, finding those extra calories could mean surviving another day. So individuals who could safely eat slightly fermented fruit gained a real advantage. Over countless generations, that tiny genetic change spread through the entire population. Without realizing it, our ancestors were adapting to alcohol long before civilization ever existed. But don't imagine ancient humans stumbling through forests drunk. That's probably not what happened. Naturally fermented fruit contains only small amounts of alcohol, usually far less than modern beer. The effect would have been mild, almost unnoticeable. The real importance wasn't getting drunk. It was learning that fermented food wasn't always dangerous. Sometimes it was one of the richest food sources around, and that simple lesson may have changed human history forever. Because once humans learned to control fermentation on purpose, everything changed. But that wouldn't happen for thousands of years. First, humans had to stop wandering. They had to build settlements. They had to grow food. For hundreds of thousands of years, people lived as hunter-gatherers, following animals, collecting wild plants, moving whenever food disappeared. That lifestyle made brewing alcohol almost impossible. Fermentation takes time, sometimes days, sometimes weeks. And people who never stayed in one place couldn't wait around for a drink. Then, around 12,000 years ago, everything changed. The Ice Age was ending. The climate grew warmer. Wild grains began spreading across huge areas. For the first time, humans didn't just collect food. They began growing it. Villages slowly appeared. People stopped moving constantly. And suddenly, fermentation became possible. Imagine storing freshly harvested grain inside a clay pot. A little rainwater accidentally gets inside. Wild yeast lands in the mixture. Days pass. Tiny bubbles appear. The smell changes. The taste changes. Without anyone planning it, the grain has become alcoholic. Someone drinks it and realizes something extraordinary. This strange liquid doesn't just fill the stomach. It changes how you feel. Nobody knows exactly who discovered this first or where, but archaeologists have found remarkable clues. One of the oldest known alcoholic drinks ever discovered comes from ancient China. Inside pottery, over 9,000 years old, scientists found chemical traces of fermented rice, honey, and fruit. This wasn't accidental fermentation anymore. Someone had intentionally mixed these ingredients together. That means humans were making alcohol thousands of years before written history even began. And China wasn't the only place. Across the ancient world, completely different civilizations were making similar discoveries, independent of one another. Some fermented rice, others used fruit, others experimented with grain. Different ingredients, same idea. Early alcohol wasn't nearly as strong as modern drinks. No vodka, no whiskey, no rum. Those wouldn't exist for thousands of years. Ancient alcohol was usually weak, often only 2 to 5%. Closer to modern beer than hard liquor, and people didn't drink it just to get intoxicated. In many places, it was actually safer than water. Ancient water wasn't always clean. Rivers carried waste. Standing water bred dangerous bacteria, but the brewing process made harmful microbes far less likely to survive. So, a weak alcoholic drink became one of the safest liquids available. But survival wasn't the only reason humans kept brewing. Alcohol changed behavior. It made strangers more comfortable, encouraged conversation, and created laughter. It became part of successful hunts, harvests, and the birth of a child. Not because people needed alcohol, but because alcohol became connected to community, to ritual, to memory. And then something unexpected happened. Alcohol stopped being just a drink. It became sacred. Think about it. You place ordinary grain into a pot, leave it alone, and come back days later to find it transformed completely. Without understanding yeast or chemistry, that process must have looked supernatural. Many cultures believed that the gods themselves had blessed fermented drinks. Some offered alcohol during religious ceremonies. Others buried it with the dead. By the time the world's first cities appeared, alcohol grew right alongside them. In ancient Mesopotamia, beer wasn't a luxury. It was part of everyday life. Workers drank it. Farmers drank it. Even children sometimes drank weak versions of it, not to get drunk, but because beer was nutritious, full of calories and minerals, and often safer to drink than untreated water. The people of Mesopotamia became so skilled at brewing, they even wrote down recipes. Some of the oldest written records in human history describe how beer was made. They even had a goddess of beer. To them, brewing wasn't just cooking, it was a gift from the gods. Then came ancient Egypt, where alcohol became even more essential. The workers who built massive monuments, including the pyramids, were often paid in bread and beer. Instead of receiving money, you'd receive fresh bread and several jars of beer. Beer wasn't simply a drink, it was part of the economy, part of daily survival. But while beer dominated Egypt and Mesopotamia, another drink was quietly becoming a symbol of wealth: wine. Unlike beer, wine required grapes, and grapes didn't grow everywhere. Growing vineyards took time, space, and careful planning, which made wine expensive. Kings drank it. Priests used it in ceremonies. The wealthy served it at feasts. Wine became more than alcohol. It became a symbol of power. Different civilizations developed their own traditions. The Greeks diluted their wine with water. The Romans turned winemaking into a massive industry. And rice wine became central to festivals in ancient China. Different cultures, different ingredients, but one remarkable pattern: almost every civilization on Earth eventually made alcohol. Why? Because fermentation solved more than one problem at once. It preserved food. It created safer drinks. It added calories, strengthened social bonds, and became part of religion. Very few human inventions have spread across the planet this successfully. Some researchers even believe the desire to brew beer may have helped inspire early farming itself, not just the desire for bread. The theory is still debated, but it shows just how important alcohol had already become. Now think about modern life. Today, alcohol is manufactured in enormous factories, shipped across oceans, and sold in millions of stores. Beer, wine, vodka, whiskey, rum, gin, tequila. Each one traces back to a discovery that began with fruit lying on a forest floor millions of years ago. But modern alcohol is nothing like ancient alcohol. Ancient fermented drinks were usually weak. Modern spirits can contain 10, 15, even 20 times more alcohol. Our brains evolved around occasional exposure to naturally fermented fruit, not unlimited access to something this concentrated. That's part of why alcohol today can become dangerous so easily. The substance itself hasn't changed nearly as much as we have. We made it stronger, cheaper, and available almost everywhere. Something that was once rare has become constant, and that changes everything. So, when did humans first drink alcohol? The honest answer is, no one knows exactly. It may have happened millions of years ago, when one of our ancient ancestors ate naturally fermented fruit. The first intentional alcoholic drink came much later, probably over 9,000 years ago, when early farmers learned to control fermentation on purpose. From that moment, alcohol stopped being an accident of nature. It became part of human culture, part of religion, part of celebration, part of civilization itself. And perhaps that's the biggest surprise of all. Humans never truly invented alcohol. We simply discovered something nature had been making all along. For millions of years, tiny yeast had quietly been turning sugar into alcohol, waiting for someone curious enough to take the very first sip. If this story changed the way you think about history, subscribe for more deep dives like this one. And tell me in the comments, if you could travel back 9,000 years, would you dare taste the world's very first beer? Or would you leave that first sip to someone else?